Publius Virgilius Maronus, Virgil, in other words, the greatest poet of Rome, one of the greatest poets of the ancient world and probably of human history. Virgil was a Roman who happened to write 3 wonderful works. The most important one, the Aeneid, named after the hero of the poem, Aeneas. I mentioned before, Aeneas, a Trojan prince who escaped from the destruction of his city. What is he doing? What does he have to do with Rome? The Trojan War happened like in the 10th century BC. Well, the story is mythical, legendary, sure, but it's the explanation that Romans used to like, was that this prince escaped from Troy, landed in northern Africa, had a love affair with the queen Dido of Carthage, and then left her, abandoned her, and went, following his destiny, to found a dynasty in the peninsula, in the Italic peninsula, that was already occupied by other groups. So Aeneas is the hero of the poem. Virgil was the poet. Why is this important? Because poetry at that time was considered to be the model, the discursive model of conduct and identity. Everything starts with this Trojan horse that we have already seen. A device designed to fool the Trojans. It worked. The warriors, the Greek warriors inside the Trojan horse opened the doors at night and started to destroy the city. They opened the gates. The Greeks came back. Well, we know that story. That's part of the Aeneid, indeed. And Virgil traces the origins of Rome then to the destruction of Troy. Here is a famous statue of Aeneas fleeing the city with his father Anchises on his shoulders and his son Anchises in at his feet. So what happened here? That memorializing myths, memorializing facts that were mixed with fiction and magic was one of the ways to explain the origin of a civilization by the Romans and other ancient people. Dido, the queen of northern Africa, who commits suicide after she is abandoned by the prince Aeneas. This is an image of Virgil and Dante at the beginning of the Divine Comedy, 1300 years later. So you have an idea of how important was Virgil in the imagination of the early Renaissance and the modern period. When we talk about the Divine Comedy, we'll see that Virgil is an important character, is the model of wisdom, of prudence, of great poetry at the same time. But he was pagan, he was lacking the knowledge of the gods. So this story of the Aeneid goes for 10 chants to explain in the beautiful narrative in verse, of course, the adventures of Aeneas and how he came to conquer not only a pagan queen, but also a new people that after 300 years, 2 of his descendants would be the founders of the city of Rome as we know it today. That's why it's called the Eternal City, because it's probably one of the oldest cities that has remained inhabited and alive in human history. Then we have a different perspective about Virgil, a perspective that has to do very much with his use by modern literature and history. I mentioned the Divine Comedy, but there are other characteristics of epic poetry that have survived. In the case of the Aeneid, critics have said, for example, David Quinn of Yale University, that the Aeneid is the epic of the winners, because indeed Aeneas is able to turn a tragedy, the destruction of his city, into a conquest. We will see that this is not the only model of epic poetry. There is an epic poetry of the losers, something that we will study in one of our next poets, Lucan.